So we don't delay anymore, but folks are of course welcome to join us here as we keep going. So I am Allison Park. I am the RAD Workforce Development Manager, and I'm also joined here by Blanca Leon Carter, who is the VP of Community Engagement at RAD Women. And we are super excited today as part of our workforce development effort to join these ladies to have a panel on recruitment and get you a perspective that you might not otherwise have, and share some ideas and answer some questions. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth Lamb from Breaking the Glass and let you take it from there, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Allison. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. We've done a partnership before with RAD Women back in June, May, sometime in the early days of the pandemic. God, it's so long, but we're happy to be here again. Yeah, if this is one of your first times joining a Breaking the Glass and RAD Women event, I'd love to take a moment to introduce our program. Breaking the Glass is a women's career development and D&I initiative founded by the technical recruiters from Computer Futures. We're featuring two of them on the panel today, Ms. Sammy Chovy and Hannah McGinnis. But what started as a grassroots organization in Austin, Texas is now a national program that partners with organizations like Visa, Charles Schwab, Walmart, Intel, and Women in Cable Tech to develop personalized programming based on the DEI goals of our partner organizations. If you're interested in getting more involved with our programs, we host lots of public events. Don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be dropping my contact info in the chat. And throughout the panel, while our wonderful speakers are giving us information and stuff, I'll be dropping their contact information as well, so y'all can stay connected on LinkedIn, because just because we don't have our normal networking events doesn't mean that we can't network remotely. So I'm going to turn my camera off and pass it over to Sammy.
Hi everyone, I'm Sammy. I am a senior recruitment consultant here with Computer Futures. I've actually been with our parent company for about 3 years in the recruitment space. So not all Salesforce, but the past about 18 months have been in the Salesforce world, and I love it. No offense to the creative recruiting I was doing beforehand, but Salesforce has definitely been a lot more fun, and really just the community there has been amazing. So anytime we have a moment like this where I can put my hand up and get to meet everybody, I'm happy to. And from here, I'm just going to be helping kind of moderate some of the questions and everything between Hannah and Jessica here today. So I will hand it off to these two specialists to kind of introduce themselves, let you know why their opinion matters on some of these questions. So Hannah, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks everyone for being here as well. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Hannah, I'm from Computer Futures, and I work as a Salesforce recruitment specialist there. Computer Futures is a global IT staffing agency, so we have offices all across the world and across the US, but I actually sit in our San Francisco office, which is where I am now. And I've specialized in Salesforce recruiting for the past 2 years. So I've been in the space that whole time. And as Sammy said, really enjoy just the Salesforce community. So it's been a great time for me. And I'm originally actually from Boston, but I moved out to California 2 years ago. And I think I'm gonna stay in California now that I've experienced snowless winters. But yeah, I'm really just excited to be here with all of you today and hopefully demystify some of the recruitment process for you.
My goodness, Hannah, I don't even know how to even follow. What an amazing introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Cash, and I am a practice leader at Slalom Consulting in our Salesforce practice in Chicago. So kind of the antithesis of California winters, getting ready to settle down for what's coming for this year. So my background, the last 20 years of my career have really been spent at the intersection of technology and transformation, with the last roughly 4 years being very focused in the Salesforce space. So a lot of what I do is help our clients figure out how to use their investment in Salesforce to drive new business outcomes. And I have the distinct pleasure at Slalom, which is one of the top 3 global partners, platinum partner of Salesforce, to hire. I get a chance to participate in and be a part of the interview journey for our incoming functional, technical, funcno-technical, and techno-functional, those are mouthfuls, talent, all the way from our new college graduates to our experienced leaders that are coming in. So I am incredibly excited to be able to offer perspective on what I look for as a part of that interview team, and often an individual that's asked to help kind of close out an interview cycle. So I'm excited to share and excited to learn from you.
Amazing. And on that note, I have a feeling we can kind of hop right in. So the way that we've structured the questions and how we kind of want to start running through them, we're going to build on some basics. We'll get a little bit more complicated towards the end, but to kick it off, we'll start very simple in the demystifying process. This one is coming to you, Hannah, but how can a candidate best prepare themselves before talking to a recruiter for the first time?
So I think there's a lot of ways to prepare for talking to a recruiter, but first, I think to make sure you've walked through your own experience and your resume to kind of think about everything you want to tell in terms of your past experiences. One of the first questions a recruiter usually asks, that I always ask on my first call, is, can you just tell me about your background in the Salesforce space and what that's looked like? And for specific Salesforce recruiters, I'm definitely not a technical person, not even any kind of the mix of the two. I'm not technical, but I've worked in the space for 2 years. So if you walk me through your projects, what you've done on them, I do understand what that means. And that's really helpful for recruiters to get an understanding of where you best fit in a role and what types of roles you're looking for. And the other thing that's really helpful for us to understand is what salary or what rate you're looking for, and really being honest with that. As a recruiter, I want the best for all the candidates I'm working with. I want them to be at a rate and a salary that they're happy with, especially because if you place someone, really below the salary they're looking for, there's no longevity in that. So that's not something we want to do. So if you can be really ready to talk about that and be open and honest, we can really have a dialogue where your recruiter can tell you, what the market is looking like, if that's realistic. And they always want to try to get you, exactly what you're looking for. So it's definitely something you can work for together. And then just lastly, bring any questions you have about the process. If you're going for a specific role that this recruiter wants to talk to you about, any questions about that role, any of those kind of questions that you're wondering, make sure to bring those to the conversation because, again, it's a two-way street. So we want to help you, but we want to understand what things you're confused about or what things you're still wondering. So we're always happy to answer those questions.
Great point, Hannah. It never hurts to ask. The more you ask, the more you know. So I think that that's a really great point there. And then Jessica, on your end, I think it's also really helpful for candidates to understand what's the best way for them to prep themselves before heading into an interview with, the actual hiring manager. We're on the spot. What kind of prep can they do before that?
Yeah, Sam, what a great question, right? Because that's just the tricky part about navigating the interview process, is that you're often speaking to multiple people along the way. And so I've got 2 pieces of, well, maybe 3, maybe it's 3 pieces of advice that I would offer. One, and Hannah, this is really just to build on what you've already offered, honestly, which is figure out what kind of story you want to tell about yourself. People love stories. People, even when they're interviewing you, love stories. And the best way, okay, if you're talking to a friend or a significant other and they ask you, what do you do for a living, right? How hard is it to describe what you do all day for work to other people? So storytelling is one way to make it easier for the person that's hearing about your experience and your background to make sense of what you're telling them. And so that doesn't mean starting from like, I was born on a Tuesday at 2 a.m. It doesn't have to be that robust, but being able to tell a story about your experiences, what you've learned, where you're growing, what excites you, what you want to do more of, is one of the best things that you can do when thinking about how you talk about yourself, I think, as part of the process. So that's number one. Number two, don't look to be a perfect match to a job description. And I would say, don't feel like you have to show up to the table with an answer about where you are or aren't a perfect match, unless you want to make that part of your story and you feel like maybe being an imperfect match is a key part of the story that you want to tell. Interestingly, at Slalom, we don't try and hire the same person every time. We want a diverse mix of experiences and points of view. And that's what we scan for in our candidates. And it's the way that we set up our interview panels so that people aren't talking to the same person that knows the same thing each time. And so it's really okay not to be that one-for-one match on every single bullet point in a description, but be ready to talk about that in your story. And then number three, and this is just sort of my shout out to being a woman navigating the process. I would be prepared to come in to ask questions about the culture and the environment and understand how women in technology are perceived within the organization or within the role that you are evaluating. Because if there is a distinct difference in how women are being perceived or treated or set up for success, male colleagues, don't do it. So a recommendation of number three is like, as you're getting ready for that first sit down with a recruiter or ongoing interviewer, like, don't be afraid to dig in and ask those questions around what is it like to be a woman in technology here? Or what is it like to be a woman in technology, a woman that's got strong technical skills, or a woman that really loves Salesforce, or, a woman that wants to make her career here? What kind of opportunities might I have? What does that look like? It is okay to make that a part of the discussion. 1, 2, and 3.
I love that. And Jessica, just a question off of this. First thing I thought of when you were talking about asking about being a woman in tech in the organization, I know you guys have a few interviews that you move through. What if you're only talking to men? How would you recommend, asking an interviewer who might not have the perspective?
I'll tell you what, I would be even more enthusiastic about asking the questions, particularly if you're only talking to men, right? I think that's a good time to say, so I haven't had the opportunity yet to speak with a woman practitioner in the practice yet. I'd be curious to get your perspective on, equity in the practice, or how opportunities are created. I think it's entirely okay to say, as a woman coming into the practice, have you found? It'd be interesting to see the response and the dialogue that could come out of that. And I would also just, as a shout out too, if you end up interviewing with 3 or 4 dudes, it doesn't mean that there aren't women, and it doesn't mean that women aren't treated equitably. It could literally mean, in terms of availability, that the women are working on 3 more, they may be more busy. They may not have the availability. So I think it's a good assumption to check, right, Sam? So like, it's a good place to just cast around a bit to understand. So what is it like here? And even asking, and my recommendation, again, if it's something that you want, I think it's okay to ask questions about, so how is work-life balance here, particularly depending on what you want to do for yourself outside of work. And I think it's entirely appropriate to ask that of somebody that could potentially be a colleague, whether it's a woman or a man.
Awesome. Thank you. And then we're going to start this question back to Hannah, but I think we'll ask this to both of you as well. And I know you answered some of this during yours, Jess, but is there anything else that can really make a candidate stand out in an interview process? How can they best shine?
Yeah, I think it's another really good question, because you don't want to just, do everything they asked. You do want to really stand out when you're interviewing. So one of the things I've had candidates do, which really stands out to hiring managers, is really doing their research to look into the company beforehand. Especially, I work in contract recruitment, so some contractors don't see the necessity of looking into the company and understanding what that company does beforehand, because they do often move projects. But these hiring managers usually are full-time people who are working there, and they want other people who are interested enough to go look at what their company is doing, and really showing that you've done that research is something that makes candidates stand out. And similarly, offering some thoughts or suggestions in a respectful way, showcasing your knowledge of the industry. You don't have to say it in a disrespectful way, like you should do this, or, directing this client of what they should be doing, but show them what you know about the industry. Maybe you've done something similar in the past. So, saying as a retail company, I've worked at a previous retail company which used, Commerce Cloud to do X, Y, and Z. So I think it could be really beneficial if you also used Commerce Cloud to do these things. Is that something you've talked about? It really is a great way to showcase a lot of your knowledge, as well as showing them that you're interested in their company and their industry. So those would be the top tips that I give.
I love that, Hannah. Love it. Sam, is it okay if I add just
It was going to you next.
To kind of yes and what Hannah offered, one of the things that I really love is when people are able to show that they're really paying attention during their interview process and stringing things together, right? So if you've talked to 2 people before you've gotten to me, it means a lot to me that you're able to reference those conversations and show up with a question or a build, to Hannah's point, right? Like bringing a point of view. So, my last discussion with John, he brought up something I thought was really interesting. He mentioned blah, 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 blah. I would love to get your perspective on that. Or, I'm really curious, in my last discussion, we didn't talk about Commerce Cloud, but it's a passion of mine. It's an area of interest. What kind of work are you currently doing in Commerce Cloud? Like, I'm looking for someone that is invested in understanding what they're getting into, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a 2-way assessment process. Not only do you want to present yourself as a candidate we would be foolish not to bring in tomorrow, but you should also be looking at where you're interviewing. Is this a place that you want to be tomorrow? And so I'm always really impressed when I have somebody that is exploring whether we're the right fit for them just as much as we are in the inverse. And then the other thing that I'm always really interested in hearing, we had a really robust conversation yesterday about this, that as women, sometimes we can lean into wanting to give credit universally. So we accomplished, we did this, we brought the solution to bear. And while it's true that it's a team effort, it is perfectly okay for you to say, and here's the role I played. So as a team, we accomplished X and my role was Y. Because as an interviewer, I'm particularly interested in how you approach problems. How do you solve tough situations? Where have you had the opportunity to advance relationships? Where have you had the opportunity to develop other people? You can celebrate accomplishments together, but I think being able to speak to kind of your specific angle, your specific flavor on things is really of interest and helps me understand who you are better.
I love that. I also always throw in, I'm a huge fan of a thank you note. I know it can be a little bit archaic, but like you were saying, think back through your conversations, put in something a little bit personal. It can be a quick little email, but like you were talking about, that critical thinking back through your conversations, I think a thank you note can really highlight that as well.
Can I add a quick mention on that? I'm huge on thank you notes. And it's not because I have like an abundance of time that I just want to be that mindful. It's really because you want to keep this experience as real and close to humanity as possible, right? You want to bring your authentic self. And I think that when you're on automatic pilot mode and acting like a robot because you're going through so many interviews, you kind of lose sight of making sure that it's a really good match. And the only way you do that, I hate to say it, it's like with dating too. You have to be your true self, right? To know that it's going to be a perfect match. So I couldn't agree more with all of those comments.
Love it. Thank you.
Okay.
We love the celebrity cameo on the and then I think that this is something that we just touched on around making sure you highlight your own role. How, and I know I actually just did something like this today. I posted a brag on LinkedIn because our VP gave me a shout out. And after our conversation yesterday about women bragging in the workplace, I was like, I'm going to do it and put that out there. But what are other ways that through an interview process, you can talk about successes or, accomplishments that you had in the workplace? What's the best way to brag? How can you do that? Either of you can answer if anyone.
Hannah, do you wanna jump in?
Yeah, I can start out. So I do think thinking of examples before you go into your interview is always a great way to do this. So thinking of, what the team achieved, but making sure to specifically talk about what you've done. That's always what I coach, my candidates who are going into interviews. I always make sure they have some examples top of mind because, examples are always great in an interview. It's similar to what Jess was saying. It creates that story for you, not just saying I have done this before, but really explaining what that is and making sure you're saying I did this, explaining the parts that you really did do. You don't have to say that you did it all by yourself, but highlight those parts that you were the one who accomplished them, the one that got things done. So really thinking about those before the interview, I think can help you make sure you're doing it and practice. I always practice before interviews and practice saying I. And if you catch yourself saying we, or if you're talking in the mirror to a friend, have them call you out when you're saying it. I think that can be really helpful too.
It's great. I think there's nothing wrong with starting, a sentence with, I'm really proud of, right? Like one of my, I'm really proud of something, I'm really proud of the work that we did and my role in it as such. I'm going to, all right, here are my 2-3 letter acronyms, and I will try to keep it short, but there is a feedback mechanism that we rely on really heavily at Slalom, which is known as SBI feedback. For those of you that are unfamiliar, it's this concept of having kind of a 3-part conversation. It's even when you want to recognize someone. So the SBI stands for situation, behavior, and impact. So here was the situation. Here was the behavior that was promoted. Here was the behavior that was evidenced. Here was the impact. And there's no reason that we can't actually tell our stories and talk about what we've done in that way. So here was the tricky client situation. Here was the opportunity. Here was a problem I was trying to solve. Here is how I showed up. Here's how I plus we showed up. Here's what I did. Here's the behavior that I evidenced, or the know-how that I applied. And then here was the impact. So that can be a good model for, again, helping provide context to somebody that doesn't know all the ins and outs of what your background or your work has been, and then helps to really clarify, like, this is behavior that I can repeat, that I can scale, that I can bring evidence of again to the table. And then here was the positive impact. So if you're uncomfortable starting sentences with things like I'm really proud, or I'm a rock star because, or I'm amazing because, also would recommend, you can totally do, you take more of a, here's the situation, here was my behavior, here's the impact. The other idea, and I don't mean to jump the gun here, Blanca and Allison, on questions. I know we had some questions submitted in advance, but there was one that really caught my eye when I was scanning through it this morning. As a mom in the workforce, I've got 2 little guys. I'm pretty sure one of them was on the camera yesterday. I asked my husband to keep them downstairs today, so you're probably not going to see them today. I've got 2 little dudes, almost 6-year-old boy twins. And I started at Slalom 6 months after they got here. So I know what it's like to navigate kind of world as a working mom with small kids. And the question that came through was around, I've been out of the workforce. Kind of, how do I even get a door open? How do I kind of get the opportunity to go and show what I can do? And again, we'll probably talk about that again during Q&A. Forgive me for jumping again. I think one of the ideas there around how do you show accomplishments? How do you do the brags? For those of you that have technical products, that have demo orgs, that have things that you have built, assets that you have built, there is no reason that you can't offer those as a proof of concept. So the old POC routine, like, I would love to provide you insight into, like, code I've built, into a solution I've developed, into a project that I helped with. Let me point you to a public website that I set up for a nonprofit. Let me show you what I've done by giving you this proof of concept, this proof that I can put my money where my mouth is one way that you can offer. And I think it'd be a real differentiator in terms of, this is a way for me to show, but not only can I talk about what I can do, but I can point you, right, when it's appropriate and it doesn't have client name all over it, and it's okay to share all of that in advance, legal. But this is a way for you to show, like, I can do this, and let me show how I do this. It's just another tool you can put in your tool set.
I love that. And since we're jumping the gun, I No, I love it. And also we're here for a casual conversation, and we just want to, talk about the things that people are interested in. And obviously, since that question came up, and I think kind of a few of the questions that came in originally were around, what if the job I'm applying for and my resume don't look exactly identical? That can be a career shift. It can be a gap. It can be trying to take the leap to the next level, or from an admin to a developer. What are the best ways to, from jump? So Hannah, on the resume, and then Jessica in an interview, what are the best ways to show I can make the pivot, I can make the leap? How do we kind of bridge those gaps? Because I know that happens a lot in the Salesforce world. You want to kick it off, maybe on the front end, Hannah?
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was a great question because it's definitely something, we see a lot. And I think someone mentioned Mom Relaunch, and there's a lot of great groups to be a part of, which are awesome. But, it's still really difficult. It's not, those groups don't make it easy. They just give you a space to have other people. But I think one of the really helpful things that you can do with your resume specifically is to be really honest. So I really encourage my candidates to try and have their resume answer any questions that a recruiter or hiring manager might have. So if you do have a gap, I encourage them to explain in your resume, like do a note, put a little, indent in and explain what that, gap was. If you're comfortable, you don't have to overshare. It doesn't have to be anything personal, but, to share that you're acknowledging that this is a gap, And the other thing I think can be really helpful is if you're going through a switch where you do have a gap in your experiences, to try and mirror the job description as truthfully as possible. So, Jess was talking earlier, you don't want to try and fit every single bullet point of this job. You're not trying to, clone yourself into what they're looking for, but I'm sure you have past experience, if you're trying to switch it, if it's likely not, to rocket science or something completely, out of left field. If you're switching, I'm sure there's applicable experience. So if you've done something in a different team setting, you've held any type of similar role, trying to mirror that job description with experiences you have that fit is a great way to show that you'll be able to do that job in the future. And then just lastly, I think the power of references and LinkedIn recommendations is huge. They're just people speaking to your abilities, saying that you have done a great job in roles previously, and you can talk to those previous colleagues and bosses, whoever it may be, and say, this is the kind of role I'm looking for. Can you talk about, X, Y, or Z experience that I did in my past role that really is applicable to this new role, even if it's not exactly the same, to show that you have those skill sets or that you would be able to be adaptable. So I think those are the things that I find to be helpful with those gaps, or when you're trying to switch to a slightly different market or slightly different area in your field.
I love those. I love those.
Yeah, Hannah, I don't know that I have that much more to offer, honestly. I mean, other than just, again, encouraging you, it's okay to make that shift. Like it's okay. It feels very vulnerable and maybe sometimes impossible, but it's okay to say, I'm looking to make a transition. Accumulating partnerships with groups like Rad Women, pursuing certifications through Salesforce, through other channels, finding ways to garner some experience, even if what you're doing is volunteering. So again, if there's a way for you to get off-book experience through non-traditional channels, if you can tackle that, fantastic. Because again, what you bring with you are those behaviors. And so part of it, again, is creating some balance between I'm trying to credentialize myself and I'm trying to kind of humanize myself. And so the behaviors that you are likely committed to around like continuous learning, continuous growth, continuous reinvention, finding passions and committing yourself to those, that's part of the story that you get to tell as well. And many interviewers are looking not only for technical fit or skill fit, but also culture fit. so to speak. So culture fit, like, is this person going to work with us? And you'd be surprised how many hiring managers will lean more into culture fit, and they figure like, we'll figure out the skills. Like, well, we'll get there. They don't need to be right there, but this person clearly is a go-getter that wants to be part of this and has done their homework and has got good questions, and that'll make a really big impression beyond just the ability to say, I've done the thing.
Agreed. And I'll also throw in there, I saw an example one time on someone's resume where they had a link to a YouTube video where for 45 seconds, they said why they were doing a career shift. And you know what? You don't need to have, I'm not great with typing of the words. I'm a little bit better with speaking of them, sometimes, not right now. But I think that I immediately wanted to call that candidate because I could tell that she was hungry, she was trying, she put herself out there. And I get it, recording yourself on YouTube, it probably took her 45 tries and it's awkward, but it was amazing. And I think she got a job faster than I've seen anyone get a pivot job because that resume just really made her stand out. I love that. And then also from one of our attendees, someone on this topic said, as one thinks about aligning themselves to an opportunity, I would encourage folks to ensure that they align not only on the work, but more importantly on the values of an organization. And I think that's what we mean, in terms of the culture fit. It's the values in the org and what you can yourself bring as well. So I thought that was
Great recap.
On
Great
there as
recap.
well. And then a little bit of a different note, and then we'll jump into a few of the other questions that were sent in beforehand. But I think holidays are coming up, New Year's coming up. As we're moving into the new normal, what kind of things can candidates be doing to keep their profile, attractive, the first person people want to call? What can candidates be doing as we're moving into the hopefully much better 2021 to be the kind of people that are getting called for interviews, on both ends?
Yeah. Hannah, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can start that off. I think for me, as a recruiter, a lot of what my hiring managers ask for and what I'm looking for is certifications. That's definitely something you can easily, well, not easily, I shouldn't say that, because I've tried getting my admin certification and it's hard. But things that are tangible that you can be doing to put towards your resume and your profile. And then the other thing I think that I mentioned before, but is really powerful, is your LinkedIn recommendations. So more and more, when recruiters send your profile to our clients, we're sending over your LinkedIn as well. So that's a part of your profile that they really like to see. And so they can really get a sense of your past experience. You're making sure you're connected to other people in the space, like that you're really engaged in the Salesforce space. And seeing recommendations from other people in the Salesforce space is very powerful. I've definitely noticed that's being taken more into account. And they can really say a lot about your experience, from a different point of view. So it's not just you and your resume talking for you. You're letting other people talk for you and sell you in as well. So that's always a great thing as well.
It's great. One of the things I had on my list for this one was something that I'm terrible about doing, which is updating and refreshing LinkedIn, right? Making sure that you've got the right keywords kind of tucked into the profile in the right places, and I think right now, looking ahead to 2021, so I'm not going to make this like a business trends conversation too much, but if you think about 2020 and this hard shift to all things digital, I have to tell you, this has been a really interesting year where most of the clients that I work with are asking themselves how to accelerate plans that they plan to get to in the next 3 to 5 years, particularly around digital customer engagement, digital commerce, digital marketing, how to tie sales, marketing, and service more closely together, how to do more with less and ask people to flex more. And what that tells me about some of the big capability sets that are going to be on high demand from a Salesforce perspective in 2021. Look, this is if any of you have ever been in a Salesforce sales pitch, they always give a forward-looking statement, kind of a safe harbor statement that's like, don't quote me because things shift. Don't make any investments on our behalf. So I will give that caveat. Again, this is, as I was saying, this is Jessica Cash, crystal ball. All right, so probably very flawed, but here's what I see a lot of the conversations from a product set being. MuleSoft, very hot right now, very hot, because clients are going, oh, okay, we should figure out how to start creating more interconnections between what we have and where we want to go. Commerce, Marketing Cloud, Health Cloud is going to be huge next year because of vaccine administration needs at the public sector level. Community Cloud is going to be a big deal because a bunch of companies went, oh, we haven't had to digitally collaborate like this with our partners, with our vendors, with our suppliers across our supply chain. So they're now coming around to going, oh, again, that thing that we were going to put off for the next few years, I guess now we need to figure that out. So if you're wondering where to maybe spend some time getting to know the product more deeply so that you can represent your interest and your passion in those spaces, those might be some places to dig in. And then back to Hannah's kind of great point from earlier, even if it's not really where you want to super invest, it could be really interesting just to form a perspective around what's going to happen with those technologies in the marketplace, so that as you are entering conversations where you're kind of maybe even reapproaching some older conversations that maybe started this year that are flowing into next year, it could be really interesting to come in with a perspective and an opinion about, you know, what's coming and what role you're hoping to play or what you find really exciting about it.
Awesome. I think all of that is really great advice, and it sounds like industry knowledge, doing research, being interested in the stuff that you're doing is very helpful for staying on top of all of that. So I think we're just about up on the time where we're going to start our official Q&A. I know we already have some overachievers who've already sent in some questions, and one of these I really loved and wanted to jump off and ask. But before we jump into that, I just want to remind everyone in the group, you can send in questions. You can send it to everyone in the group. If you want it to be totally open, you can send it just to the panelists. Or if you had a specific question, you can say, hey, Jess, what do you think on this? If if you have something you really want some advice on or something like that. So Q&A is open. Feel free to send some stuff in. But from our previous questions that came in, as everybody was registering, I thought this one was important to ask here. So what are the opportunities for older women entering the Salesforce development space? Is there still a lot of age discrimination, or is hiring older women considered a part of diversification in the workplace? Do either of you have a thought on
As
that?
an old lady, I have an opinion on this.
Go for it.
You know how I said earlier, if you're somewhere that differentiates women from men in the technical practice and treats them differently, run as fast as you can. If you're somewhere like that now, run as fast as you can. I'm going to double down on that statement here. If you are experiencing discrimination, or if you feel like there's pushback because of your age when you're assessing a potential employer or potential employment arrangement, run. Because I would absolutely not hold that is normal or to be expected. Look, our practice is just a microcosm. So but I can offer that our practice, 48% of our practice is made up of people of color and women. Some combination, okay? Now, is that totally 50? We're getting there, like one hire at a time. We did have 2 women start this week. Go ladies. So like, it's happening. It's all happening. Your age and your gender are not limiters. And if they're treated that way, that may not be the right place for anyone, much less for you. And I would invite, anyone else that has a perspective on this. I'm certainly not the only one with a perspective on this. And I know technically Allison and Blanca are here for Q&A, but like Hannah, Sam, Allison, like I think this is a really important question for us to address. So if there are other perspectives, I think it would be really valuable to hear them.
Yes, I think you put it perfectly. As also an older woman in the workforce, it does mean very often I found that you're working with younger folks, and certainly in tech, you're working with a lot more men. But yeah, you put it so beautifully. It's just not a delimiter. It's not something that should be something that's an exception when you walk in the door. And if you're treated like that's an exception, you want to take a hard look at that's probably not the right fit. unless they're celebrating that, hey, you know, I think you'll fit in really well here. You know, it's yeah, I think hopefully this makes everyone feel empowered, rather than feel like it's something I need to talk around or have to rework my resume or hide when I graduated from college or high school or whatever that is. Don't put that out of your mind. Be your authentic self. And if that's not the right job for you, that's a blessing. And there is one out there that is. And probably a lot more than one.
Yeah.
Great, Allison.
Blanca, you joined on too. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
I'm just going to go with the be your authentic self. I dye my hair really well, but I transitioned after 20 years of being in a role and leading technology, and that was just darn scary. One, because yes, I did take into consideration, you know, my age and how that would be looked upon, and then two, also because it was a different field, right? I went from nonprofit and I was transitioning into something corporate, and for me, it was you know, having those kind of misbeliefs like, is nonprofit up to par with what the corporate world needs, and do I qualify? And you know, you just have to like hone your like inner Wonder Woman or whatever super Shira you like. Have your superpower pose that me and Allison talk so much about, because bringing you and sharing the wealth of knowledge and experience that you have is going to go by far longer in the right atmosphere when you do find the right company.
And there are so many, every time before I have a big conversation, if it's a promotion presentation or anything, there are so many TED Talks out there that will make you feel so empowered before walking in and talking about any of these things. And I think that that was a piece of information one of my mentors gave me. Watch one of those 5-minute TED Talks. I know the power pose came from one of those, at least that I had seen, but there are a million out there that will that probably touch on whatever you're feeling insecure about going into that meeting. There's probably a TED Talk to help empower you on that as well. Okay, I know one of the questions that we had gotten earlier that I think is a good one to bring up, especially if we are talking about any kind of pivots or things like that. So one of the questions on here was, what should I answer for the question, what salary are you seeking? I'm looking for an entry-level position, but I think that this question goes for any level. What do we, if it's saying it, I think it sounds like on that question, right off the bat, if it's kind of an application and maybe asking for your salary requirements, what are some good ways to answer that?
Jessica, did you want to start that off?
I have a lot of opinions about that. I think you have to ask for what it is that you want and need, entry level or not, and be prepared to be realistic and be prepared for it to be a conversation. I don't think that we should shy away from the conversation, but I do know that countless studies have shown that women are the worst about negotiating for salary and for asking for what you feel like you need. So if you're, at least start with what you need, right? And then set your next goal to ask for what you want. But I think the sooner you can lean into what it is you want, and then again, just be prepared for it to be a conversation. It doesn't make you look bad. It doesn't give you a reputation. It doesn't, money is, we have to be paid to do to do the things, to pay for the things, to live. So it's okay for that conversation to be a back and forth. And I think it's okay for you to express what is going to be best for you. And Hannah, I mean, I'm sure you negotiate this all day long and probably have tons of tips on what you wish people would do more often. I'd love to hear your advice.
Yeah, I think you put it well in terms of you have to ask for what you need. And from a recruiter's point of view, I really want to have an open conversation with you about what that is. You know, I have worked out with people what their mortgage is and, you know, their relocation to California. Like, I've gone through all the numbers to help them figure out, you know, what we can do to make it work. So I think in terms of when you're speaking to a recruiter, we want to understand, everywhere where you're coming from, and we want to make it work with the client, and we'll be really honest with you both ways. We don't want to price you out of any opportunities. We want to make sure it works for you. So kind of like I said earlier, that honesty, I think, is so important when you're having those conversations with a recruiter, to make sure you're telling them what it is you need. I think that's just the most important part for me. And I think if you're speaking to someone, if you directly speak to a hiring manager first, if you're not going through a recruiter, I do tend to say that I would advise, when you're speaking to a hiring manager, to say that you would need to know all of the information first. So you want to, you don't want to give that information before an interview. You want to take into account, the benefits. You're looking for the whole package. You want to understand the company. You want to understand the role, the responsibilities, and then you can give a more accurate number, because it's true. You're not just that number. That number might be what you need, but you do want to understand, if they're asking you to do all the things in their whole organization, you're going to need a lot more money in order to do that, if you're expected to do that. So I think in that situation, it is important to say, I don't go by one salary. It's really important for me to understand the whole picture in terms of all those other areas before we discuss salary. So I guess those would be my two kind of tips there.
And I'll just add, because I've transitioned twice in the last, 19, 20 months, I forget how many months now, but two big transitions. And some lessons learned that I found is, one, do your research, right? Because you want to know, no matter what level you're going into, you want to know what the market says, right? So do your research in that, know the company well, do your research on Glassdoor to see how the company pays, in addition to what the global market has, right? And geographic markets. But also, don't feel like you have to be married to one number when you give your salary. Give a range. You can say, this is my low, this is my high. I'd like to be somewhere there, maybe closer to the high, but you can give a range.
Mhm.
The other thing is,
Give you my one badass negotiating. This is for my little sister. Okay, I have a little sister. She's not that little anymore. 2 years difference. Like, serious career woman. Like, she was on Wall Street for a while. It's just like, I just would have never expected. And she was offered a position in Dallas, and she was in New York at the time. So she was gonna have to move. And they said, okay, so let's talk about salary. What are you making now? And her response was, why is that relevant? The job that I'm going to be doing here is completely different than the job that I do now. It's in a different function. It's different responsibilities. So what I make now is not relevant. What are you willing to give me? Now, that, again, it was a badass move. I don't know if I'm necessarily recommending that all the time. But it worked out for her. We went, oh, okay, here's what we're willing to. She was like, no, that's no good. We'll start again. Like, and it worked out. But I'm just saying, you have that power in the process. This is, it's a livelihood. You're not asking for a favor or a handout, or like you're asking for a livelihood in exchange for the goods and value and services that you're bringing to the table. So do not be afraid to ask for what it is you feel like you need and you want.
also, a lot of states make it illegal for them to ask you what you're making now. You can look that up. I think your sister had a great answer. But I mean, she sounds like she said it with confidence, but a lot of places really can't ask you what you're making now. So I would say, wherever possible, find your way to answer that by saying,
Love it.
here's what I'm looking for.
I think she did this too. She was doing this a lot during, maybe.
Yeah.
That's what I hope for. Anyway, in my mind's eye, that's what she was doing.
No, I love that. And I think that, let me see, I have a question here that I'm going to pass to Hannah, because I think this is a great one. How would you suggest going about finding a recruiter that would be a good fit for you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think a lot can be done on LinkedIn. So, you definitely want someone, if at all possible, who specializes in what you're doing. So me specifically, obviously, I'm a Salesforce recruiter. So you want to be talking to someone who recruits in the Salesforce space. You don't want to really be speaking to generalist recruiters. They may sometimes come across Salesforce roles, but you definitely want to try and be speaking with someone obviously who specializes in the same space. I think also user groups, colleagues, friends. The way that I get connected with a lot of my candidates is through referrals. So definitely ask people around you, is there a good recruiter you've worked with? Ask people, in the Salesforce space and different user groups, have you worked with a specific company that you recommend? I would highly recommend Computer Futures. I think we have great recruiters here. So if you want to speak to any of us, definitely reach out to our LinkedIn or anything. But I think word of mouth is really a good way. Definitely the same I said for everyone else's profiles. Look if your recruiter has recommendations as well. I ask my candidates to write those for me if they've had a positive experience working with me. So if it's a good recruiter, they should have some recommendations from people to tell you what it's like to work with them. So those are some of the ways I would say that you can find a good recruiter, hopefully.
That's great.
And the other thing
We talked a bit yesterday, and we won't have to open the whole can of worms here, but there are definitely some differences depending on what kind of employment you may want, right? So I represent consulting and Hannah represents that sort of contracting arm. And then of course there's going, as Blanca mentioned, there's going kind of in-house and working maybe as for an employee within an organization. So I would definitely recommend spending some time thinking about what kind of experience you want. It can be hard to try and do all three of those at once because they're looking, not that they're looking for totally different things, but they are serving some different needs. And so it might be worthwhile to spend some time figuring out, all right, do I want something that's internal? Do I want something that's consulting? Do I want to be a contractor? And focusing some effort and energy in that direction.
And as Hannah said at the beginning of the call, if you don't know, ask. I think almost everybody that you're talking to will walk you through what the difference is between all of those three things are. They all have huge pros. They probably have cons. Like it's worth knowing the full picture across all three of those opportunities. And I think anyone here, if you do have questions, we're all happy to run through what that looks like. The only other piece of advice I was going to say is searching for a job can be soul draining and hard, and there's rejection and there are the highs and there's all the good stuff, but like in searching for a recruiter, make sure it's someone you want to talk to all of the good, the bad, and the ugly about. That can be internal, that can be a recruiter, but like this person is there helping you find your new livelihood, helping you make that big jump. Like make sure it's somebody you like too, because that person, they'll probably have a little bit more effort in finding you what you want if you guys really get on too. I think the more open you are on both ends, it really helps.
That's great.
And I think that's wrapping us up around our end of time. I know we aren't supposed to go too long, but I feel like we had some amazing things run through today. And again, I know the LinkedIns are being sent around. Please connect. I think all of us would love to know everyone who was in attendance here. Hopefully we got a little bit of useful information somewhere, somehow from this. So that's us.
Thank you all, Allison. I'm sure you're going to say it too, but like you all have rad hearts, trail heart, whatever you want to call it. We appreciate your time and sharing the wealth of knowledge when it comes to a topic that can be very foreign and challenging for a lot of folks. So we appreciate you.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting us in. And Jessica, it was wonderful to meet you as well and have you join the conversation. So
really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you all. And thank you to our panelists as well. You did an amazing job.
Seriously. Great job.
Our pleasure. Now get out there, be super women or whatever, as Blanca said, whichever you're into, power pose, brilliant. Everybody.